Now we're just discussing part 2, the details of what the Rav claimed are proofs that this is not the Chilas and Techeiles. This was officially the main part of this year. And again, the first part I spoke was what most people probably came out of. Now the second part is the details, which Talmidei Chacham that learned the sugya would be in a henna from. So let's go through a few details. The Rav started with a Yisoid, a Paladik Yisoid. I'll be Magdim. Everyone knows the Ramban and the Melchemes, the Hakdama to Melchemes. The Ramban writes, Al Toiv B'Vavcha Ki Kol Shivasi Al Harav Zechariah Kulam Iniyat Shuva Nitzachos. Don't think that I think all my kashas on the Balmor are black and white. And then machriach you to be murdered. No, I don't think that. I did not trick myself. And you're gonna think, oh, you're gonna find the kasha. You're gonna ask, oh, look, I have a kasha on you. I have a suffix in what you're saying, the Ramban. Oh, you can be very happy that you found something to be done on what I'm talking about. Don't be so happy. Ain't another cane. Why? Because it's clear. I'm not writing anything that's black and white. The Melchemes is not to give you any tiny such a black and white. Black and white. Anyone that learns the Talmud knows that there's in the machlekes of the Mefarshim, there's no rayas gemuris. No such thing, rayas gemuris. There's no, with all the kasha you ask, there's nothing that comes out clear. In this chachma of Torah, moifis borrowed. There's no such thing as a moifis, a clear borrowed moifis, just like math. Or anything like that. It's not black and white. He says we're going to put our whole heart and soul in every in Dion and Machlekes, to be marchik any of the days, Bisvaris, Machris. We'll go according to the Svarim. What our Seichel says, that is Imaskov, B'svaris machrias, when you go according to the B'svaris, which are machriya, through the Svaris that what we're masig will be machil everything else. The nasim yisrin hechsha baldina mipashte halachas. We're going to give the yisrin to the baldin, which is the more pashtis v'hogan hasugis im haskamas haseichel hanachin v'zois tachas chalteinu. The only thing which a chacham could do, anyone that's learning could go with his chacham. There's no such thing as black and white. This is not a math, and we have to use our seichel, and we have nothing more than that. The Chazon Ish, when he discusses the subject, we should not leave go of our seichel. We have to be miyasid, a big mishkal on the hekesh hasichli. She hamalach ben hayotze v'hayitze. The seichel is the malach between the Hashem and the person, and that's the only option we have to learn the sugyas. So, meaning to say that in order to learn any sugya, we have to use our seichel and our svara. Nothing is black and white. The Rav started the shir. He's saying that even if it's 70% proven that this is the right chilazim, he would not be mekabelit. He was not going to be gerus. It means nothing to him. It's 70% proof, doesn't mean anything. It has to be 99%. We're being mechaber something new, not because of Safek Deraisa, that tiny which was already all the Chachamim disagree with, that we don't have to. Some say, oh, Safek Deraisa, we don't have to be machmer. But in this case, which is refuted by all the Gedolei Achrayim, it's not as tiny. We're starting something new. In order to start something new, you have to be 100%, 99%, 70%. We won't be able to. It doesn't mean anything to us. It's unbelievable. What's the difference between 70 and 99%? 70 and 99% is, even if you prove me, misvara, it looks like you're right. The rayas are bringing a starker rayas. You know, I might have a kasha here, I might have a kasha there. Misvara, the seichel is telling us that you're right. No, but it has to be black and white. That's why along the whole shir, the Rav was not goyrus anything. That's not the Rav is only goyrus anything that's black and white. If you could prove me that I'm wrong, black and white, then I'll take it. If not, 70% doesn't mean anything to me. So he'll have a kasha, and I'll answer him with the svara. That's useless. So we won't discuss anything which is probably with svara. We, Be'ez Hashem, will be discussing black and white ma'arekomis as I have done until now, and we will go in the Rav's way of being machzik and the gedolei achronim in only kunei in rishonim k'malachim only kunei adam, and we will be only quote black and white ma'arekomis of gedolei achronim and rishonim. Okay, the first question the Rav asked was about Seder. But by the time Seder, we find that the Kosher Mata, the Gemara says in Shabbos the Ayin Daled, in the Mishkan was back Seder, you had to make nets. The Rav said it would be ludicrous to use nets for the snail. But the only problem is that the Metzias is that all generations, in order to catch the Murex trunculus, they use nets. Today's days, they sometimes use nets. They have scuba divers, but they use nets also. Nets was the thing that was used. This is the Metzias, and that's why, however ridiculous it is, that's the Metzias. Next question, the Issa Tzeda. He said there's a world war. If this Tzeda, then Malacha and say, not Kosher Matet. There's a trap. If trapping a snail is that, over Issa Tzeda. We know there's halacha. If anything is nitzad v'oimid, something which you don't have to work on trapping, it's right there. It's easy to catch. Is not tzeda. There's no tzeda on that. Tzeda has to come with some halacha. If it doesn't use a malacha, if you don't need a malacha, then it's not also on Shabbos. So he says the Techeiles that says that by a snail there's no tzeda. So how could it be that the Murex trunculus is the chalazin if there's no tzeda by a snail? We know the Gemara says there's tzeda by a snail. This tzeda by chalazin, this proof. He says even though there's a world machlokes, and we're not going to say that the chalazin, the Techeiles is totally if there's tzeda or not. According to this, the Murex is not the chalazin. Now you can't say it can't be totally in such a shaila. Obviously, if Techeiles already held that there's no tzeda by the chalazin, the Murex trunculus is shorn at it. The shaila is tzeda by a snail is a whole different topic, and the chalazin not Techeiles obviously wasn't a snail. That's what the Rav says. There's a whole world war. The Shoyim this way, the Shoyim that way. That there will be one bomb kasha on the chalazin not Techeiles. But the only problem is that there is no machama gedola on if the chalazin not Techeiles, if there is tzeda by a snail. It's actually many Rishonim are clear. That there is tzeda by a snail. Many Rishonim are clear that there is tzeda by a worm. There's only one Rishon. He's a Rishon, but it's only one Rishon against at least 10 Rishonim that there's tzeda by such a creature. And just let me quote it. There's one of the Shemona Shratzim is a Chayvit. The Chayvit is one of the Shemona Shratzim, and the Mishnah says Shemona Shratzim. This tzeda by Shemona Shratzim from the Torah. That's what the Mishnah says. Shemona Shratzim mina b'Torah. Hatzadam is chayiv. One of them is the Chayvit. What is the Chayvit? Rashi writes a few places. The Chayvit is a limtza. The Cheskini on the parasha writes the Chayvit is a limtza. The Samag writes the Chayvit is a limtza. The Ravid writes the Chayvit is a limtza. The Radak writes the limtza. And Rashi Chagiga says, as we said it before, limtza is a snail. There's no question. All these Rishonim, we just mentioned 5 Rishonim, Rashi, Cheskuni, Ravid, Radak, and the Smag, according to them, the Shemona Shratzim, the Chayvit is a snail. And we know from the Mishnahs there is tzeda by a snail, by a Shemona Shratzim. Then, there are many Rishonim that say there is tzeda by a worm. Ben Yeruchim Nesiv Yud Beis Chelik Yud Sefer Haner says it. The Miki Yosef says it, and Rashi actually on the Mishnah Shemona Shratzim Sheshlam speaks about over there. Ein Sham Barashi, he speaks about how there's tzeda by a worm. It's a question of the girsa, but look, the Rabbi Yosef quotes Rashi Talas. It's clear from the Mefarshim he's supposed to say Talas and Rashi. Rabbi Yeruchim and Sefer Haner and the Rabbi Yosef all quote Rashi as saying this tzeda by worms. So we have quoted 5 Rishonim, actually, that say this tzeda by a snail, and another 3 Rishonim that say the 5 Rishonim say this tzeda by a snail. Another 3 Rishonim say that there's tzeda by a worm, and we already quoted that many Rishonim that say that the chilazon is a worm. And this is all after all the Achronim and that we quoted earlier. They all say that the chilazon is a snail. We know there's tzeda by chilazon. All these tens of countless mekayros that there's tzeda by a snail. So we have a Techeiles Response that says there isn't. Now, there's 2 reasons why Techeiles Response is not shver. Even if we'll be mesiaches to the machlekes rishonim as even. We won't go according to the countless mekayros that there's tzeda by a snail. The Svar is mechayiv, and that's what the Gedolei HaPoskim said, that taking out a snail, catching a snail using tachsisi tzeda by putting a net in the water, leaving meat in the net, and now the snail has to go into the net, and that's how you pull it out. That would be clearly act of tzeda, even by something which if it will be on the ground, because you need tachsis tzeda, even that. So that itself would make a reason why this tzeda by chilas and techeiles, and why it's not shver from Techeiles Response. And if anyone looks at the lashon of the Techeiles Response, he sees that he says ein zaz ki im ma'at b'yoser. Possibly he's talking about a different type of snail that almost doesn't move at all, but that's a different. We don't have to come on to that. We have all the mekayros that clearly say it's the overwhelming majority of Rishonim that say there's a tzeda by a snail, and an overwhelming majority of Rishonim and Achronim that say there's tzeda by worms. And I think that would be suffice for this shaila. And to get into the explanations, I will not get into explanations. Here's totally in Svara. If you want to look up my Sefer Marakia, we'll discuss it. Another shaila the Rav asks from the Gemara on Shabbos. We know that the Gemara says that we try to get the dye out of the snail while it's alive. If it's not alive, then it's not going to give a good dye. That's what the Gemara says. We want that there should be a good sphere. In order to be a good sphere, we need the dye, the chilazon, to give out a good dye. We need it to be alive. So the Rav said, actually, the Metzias is that in today's days they make the dye from that. This fact is absolutely not true by the Mura. As a matter of fact, the way they get the dye is after it's dead. Unbelievable. The Metzias is, says the Rav, that today's days they take out the dye only after it's dead. And it takes 12 hours. Even in 12 hours, it's still good. The dye is still good 12 hours after it's dead. I have no clue where the Rav got this information from. It is a clear fact, just the opposite. If they work very hard in getting the dye out while it's alive. If they would take it out while it's not alive, it wouldn't be able to use the dye. It would be not good. The second you take the dye out when it's not alive, the quality of the dye deteriorates tremendously. That is absolutely a no-no for the Techeiles industry today's days, to take it out while it's live. I have no clue where the Rav got this fact that they dafka take out the dye after it's dead. It is totally incorrect. Okay. The Rav, this is a very important thing. The Rav quoted that the main riot, this is what the pro-Techeiles people are relying on. that the Kali Ilan and Murex trunkless are 100% identically in the chemical structure. And we know in Chazal only speak about Kali Ilan and Murex and the Techeiles. So obviously, if these two things are exactly identical, so this must be the right one. This must be the other choice. This is what the Rav said over. And then the Rav said, he said this over from Dr. Zayderman, who I was able to speak to today. So, he has COVID. That's point number one. Point number two is, he said over that Dr. Zayderman actually made a test. There's a Gemara that says that you make a test. There's a way to making a test to prove if what you find in the street is Techeiles not Techeiles or not. You use different things and you put it together and you let it soak. If it comes off, you know it's Kal Ilan. If it doesn't come off, you know it's Murex trunkless. And he said, Dr. Zayderman made a test, and did it come off? Kal Ilan, did it come off? Or I forgot the exact. He failed. The tests failed. So he said, even though Dr. Zayderman holds that this is the right Techeiles, but he proved that it's not. He made a test, and the test from the Gemara failed. So, number one, I was curious, so I got in touch with him, and I called him up. I spoke to him today, and he sent me an email. So this is what he writes about this. No, I have never even attempted to perform those Gemara's tests on any samples at all. I have always, now for the last 50 years, contended that the exact identity of the ingredients, and in particular the amounts required, aren't known, so we cannot duplicate these tests. The salient and crucial significance of these tests for us today is that Techeiles is not indigotin, meaning to say, first of all, he says he never attempted to make it, and he holds it's not possible to make. So the fact number one is not true. And then fact number two, which is not only that it's not true, it's impossible to be true. Because it's not the same. Not only didn't he make the test, it's not the same. The only creature in the world, the only thing in the world that has, there is something called monobroma indigo, if I'm saying it over correctly, is what the Murex trunkless has. One of the compounds that make up one of the things that make up the dye of the Murex trunkless is monobroma indigo. That's the only creature in the world that has it is the Murex. When the scientists want to identify something is from the Murex, and the old articles that they have found from thousands of years ago, this is the test. It does not have, which the Kal Ilan does not have. So both things are totally inaccurate. First of all, he never made a test. Second of all, they are not 100% identical. There is something which is very different than them, which obviously, if that's the case, then that's not the proof of that the Techeiles. This main proof, which the Rav quotes, that is the Techeiles, that why do we hold the Murex trunkless is the Techeiles, not Techeiles? The main proof, which the Rav understood, that is the proof, is inaccurate, because it's impossible to be accurate, because it's not the same. What is the proof that we have the Techeiles, not Techeiles? There are enough Ketresim, anyone can get it, there are many places to get it, look it up. But this is not the proof. I am not coming to discuss what the proof is. You're not trying to prove it. But the idea that the main raya, the Rav understood was impossible to be true, and the idea that he based that they tested it and proved that this is wrong, that's also not true. It reminds me of, I wrote a kuntras on our Gaman, and someone put out a kuntras against it. And he comes to me, he says, before I put it out, I want you to look over it. So this guy was actually a shliach from someone to show it to me. He wanted to be nice. I should go over to it. It shouldn't be too strong against it. And I said, I'll read it. So I should go over it and to see if I agree to put it out. Very nice of him. So I said I'll agree one tonight. I'll agree to go over it. If the person that wrote the anti-kuntras against my kuntras knows what I wrote in my kuntras, because obviously you have to know what you're writing against in order to write against it. So why was I choshesh you didn't know? Because it was more of a kanois. I understood that it was a real kanois, kuntras, and I understood if it's coming from kanois, he probably doesn't know what I wrote. And so this person tells me, what's the difference? The person who wrote it against you saw the kuntras once 2 years ago, and now he's writing a kuntras against it. Meaning to say, by seeing it once 2 years ago, he decided now to write a kuntras against it. And he couldn't repeat over what I wrote. He was writing a kuntras against my kuntras without knowing at all what I wrote. It was unbelievable. 2 years later, obviously I told that person this is totally unacceptable. 2 years later, this person wrote a kuntras against me, and then the kuntras, everything I brought for proof was a proof against me, obviously. But so I don't understand how the Rav could give a shir an hour and 50 minutes against the people that are wearing Techeiles without knowing even the main basic rayas of those that hold that this is it. Okay. Then the Rav said there's 17 Rishonim against the Murex. That's not it. And then he said that anyone that and those that disagree with it, those that hold the Techeiles and Techeiles usually agree that the Rishonim disagree with them, and they're a bunch of Chamorim. And sometimes they have the covet for the Rambam to be machik and things like that. But with Derech Klal, they agree that the Rishonim are against them. So let's see some Rishonim, not going through every raya. Rambam, it's a dog. He says, Yorks is not a dog. We have a Mesiris. It's not. We have a Mesiris that the Chilazon is a dog, and the Rambam writes it's a dog. Number one, Rishon. A Rishon that disagrees. Rambam, who's going to argue? Miyava Acha HaMelech. The only problem is, which the Rav didn't mention, is that in Masechtas Kelim, the Rambam writes that the Chilazon is a Balchai Yami. He tzadaf so Balchai Hayami Hanikr Chilazon. He writes that has a shell. The Mishnah speaks about Chilazon, Oishe Kasher Chilazon, B'Roisha, Shail of the Kelim, whatever it is. What is the Chilazon? We're talking about a shell from a Balchai Hayami, which is called Chilazon. Okay, number one. So the Chilazon has a shell. If Avraham Rambam on the Gemara of a Petzei Chilazon b'Shabbos Chayiv writes that Petzei is kepetzias hagoizim, smashing. When the Gemara says Petzei, means like you're smashing a shell of a nut. Egoiz. Obviously, he's also learning that it has a shell, like a snail. And then we spoke about the Rambam. We spoke about the Rebbein Tanchin Shalmi that clearly says that the Chilazon is a snail. So we have a Rambam that says it's a dog, but the only problem is we have a Rambam that says it has a shell. We have a Rambam that learns clearly it's a shell. We have a very Tankin Shalmi that learns it's a snail. So obviously, they understood, I will speak about it a little further, that the word dog is not any contradiction to a snail. And actually, if you want to see, you look it up in the Sefer Be'er Moshe from the Debetzina, writes clearly in the Rambam that the Rambam doesn't mean that, and the Sefer Ma'aseh Melech, also from the Veitzner Rav, also says in the Rambam that dog does not mean dog. It was some Bal Chayami, like a Choymet. They also say it. So I'm not sure how when we have Rishonim and Achrayim that clearly explain the Rambam, not like it's on its surface meaning, and the Rav didn't say them over. Obviously, according to them, the question doesn't start. The Rav said something unbelievable. The lashon of the Rambam is the Einoi Ke'einat Techeiles. The Rambam says that he goes through the details of the Chilazon, what it is, and one of the things is that Einoi Ke'einat Techeiles. The lashon of the Rav was Einoi is its eyes are blue. Right. The Chilazon's eyes are supposed to be blue. And the Rav Bekitzer said, nothing can be further than the truth. Meaning to say that it's obvious that the Merik Shamslis doesn't have a blue eyes. And the Rambam writes, the Einak Einat Techeiles. Its eyes have to be blue. Now, where the Rav got the meaning of the words "ve'enai ke'enat Techeiles" means the eyes. Beyond my understanding, is no question. This is the pashut meaning of the Rambam. Is ve'enai means the coloring. The color of the snail is the color of the Techeiles. Actually, in the Rambam Frankel, the lashon is "einek in hayam." Obviously, the Rav didn't see the Rambam Frankel because obviously the ocean doesn't have eyes, and the eyes of the ocean are not blue, so it's impossible. The Rav saw the Rambam Frankel, and there's no other explanation how the Rav got to this meaning, meaning that the eyes of the chilazon is supposed to be blue, and that's a raya brura against the chilazon atchela, the mirex. Only if the Rav held that the mirex trunkles is a joke, and wouldn't have to be medagdik in the rayas that we are bringing. The Rav brought from Rashi that it's a worm. And another place, Rav writes, it's a dark cotton. So he says, if it's a worm, it can't be. A worm is not a snail. And if it's a dark cotton, it's also not a snail. It's unbelievable. So he says, we'll find out when Mashiach comes what exactly to do. But right now we have a stira between a worm and a fish. But a snail, it's not. It's not even a question. Pella, Rashi writes in Avodah Zarah, and Rashi writes in Bechayris that it's chilazon is a snail. So you now have three options. I'm not sure why the Rav didn't have this option. I'm sure, like I said before, the Rav was not given all the information that he would have liked to have. Now, the etzem svara that the worm is not a snail, I don't understand. Why isn't a snail is a worm with a shell? Why a slug is not a worm? A snail is a slug with a shell. I don't understand. Actually, there are many achronim when they speak about a chaymet, they refer to a chaymet as a worm. Look in the. I'm just going to tell you the Marmakomis. We'll read one. Telea the pretoya in Yeridea Sevel Amavov are oischas Telea the lav minei gavel going the minke the asam almlik going chaymet cotton. Telea, we're talking about a certain worm which is like a chaymet cotton. In the Sefer Rosh Ephraim for friends Almagolius over here said the same thing. The Sefer Beis David over there says the same thing. Prima Godim in Sim Pei Dalad when the Mechaber speaks about a worm says it's talking about a snail. Sefer Alichus Olam Nesivus Hara Yeridea Sim Alam Vav says the same thing. Worm's a snail. And the list goes on. I have no koich to say it over. The Ravid says in the Chuvas Tumandeim, Atol Eshal, I'll share it Shanimti B'Kdera. What's the halacha if you have a Kdera, you're cooking and you find the sherets? Sheminig Mitzas Mekoimis Shaboikin Esat Helas. We check the worm. Imichas Alav. Is it appropriate what they're annoyed by the worms to check if it's missing or something? Maybe chaser, if it's missing, we ask the whole Kdera. And the writer goes on about this shiloh about the worm. He says, and he goes on with the shiloh. He's calling it a snail, a worm. His Sefer Yireim in his Hagdama. He speaks about, calls himself a worm, like a shablo, which is a snail. And the Tashbats in Sefer Mogan Ovis, he says, the Hikamoy Shablu, Shetemes Yahalech, Shetoich Shofeferes. He's talking about a certain creature which is like a snail. V'yigdal al tzlolim grows on the rocks of the ocean. V'hatalasahi, and the worm, he's referring to the snail, Toitzi Chatzi Gufa B'teich Shofeferes, takes out the worm, goes out of the Nartic from where it is, and he goes on and on. He's speaking about a worm and a snail simultaneously as the same exact thing. Okay, so that's what obviously is disagree. The Achronim and the Rishonim disagree with. Now he asked a stira. So between a worm, is it a fish or is it a worm? The problem is we have the same stira in other Rishonim. We said over from the Rambam. The Rambam says that one place it's a fish, another place says it has a shell. He calls it a balchayami. The The Ravya and the Rash. The Ravya in Simon's Kuf Tzadik Daled says the Chilazon is a worm, and the Rash on, sorry, the Ravya in Shesach Shabbos Simcha Reish Gimel says that the Chilazon is a fish, and the Rash on Mishnah Kalim also says the Chilazon is a fish. The only problem is that the Rash in Pesachim Mem Vav on the Bay says that the Chilazon is a fish. Oh, he also says a fish. I'm sorry. And the only problem is that the Rash and the Ravya write that the Chilazon is a worm. So, in one place they write the Chilazon is a fish, in one place they write the Chilazon is a worm. So we have a stira for former Rishonim that they describe, is it a fish or a worm? Is it a fish or a sheretz? So obviously, the Ravid already calls the worm a snail. All these Rishonim had no problem calling a fish, a worm, a snail, all the same name. And there's many rayas that the minig in the Kadmoinim would call, the Chazal would call fish, a worm, and a snail with the same name as a fish. And if you want, you can look at my Sefer Marakia, Chelik Beis and Zayin. I bring down all the Marakaim in this. So the question is invalid. Sorry, I'm fasting. I'm sure everyone else is fasting. So not so clear. Almost finished. Another question Rav asked. The Gemara speaks about a patzei chilazon is shayla and dash. So he says they bring a raya. The word patzei means to smash the snail, smash the smashing something. So obviously, patzei smashing that means it has a shell. So he says no. Rashi says you push the goof of the worm. You push it. You push the worm, and that's how the word the tzeva comes out. Now he says, so obviously they didn't learn the Rishonim. So what's the answer? The Rav says the answer is that if Rashi would have known what the Murex is, then he would know that Petzea doesn't mean Petzea. Petzea means the shell. So they had it wrong. So so Rashi was the Adam. So we're Chamarim. That is the Rav's way the Rav puts down this Shaila. That we're all masking that Rashi didn't know what the Chilazon is, and Rashi got the Gemara wrong. So there's two things here. Step number one, that we mentioned already, the Gaonim and Rabbi Avraham and Rambam on this Gemara of Petzei Chilazon, they both clearly say that the Chilazon has a shell, and that's the meaning of the Gemara Petzei Chilazon. So it's not just as far as from Yigalite, it's Gedolei Rishonim, which the Rav obviously wasn't notified about, that learned this Gemara as being a shell. But what's mind-boggling is the Rav mentioned that the Avnei Nezer speaks about this subject, and he also speaks about it being from this Gemara being proof that it's a shell. And in this, the Rav says, but Rashi disagrees. It's a pella. Because the Avnei Nezer over there in the Tshuva clearly says why Rashi was forced to learn that we're talking about pushing the Petzei is going on the worm and not on the shell. He clearly says Rashi also could have learned that it has a shell. But Rashi was forced, machmas melachas dash, even if you're smashing this shell, if you have to smash something else afterwards, it's not considered dash. Rashi was forced, machmas melachas dash, to say that the Petzei is going on the worm. Not because he didn't have a shell. Rashi agreed that it had a shell. But for different reasons, Rashi has learned the Gemara is going on the worm. So it's unbelievable that when the Rav brings Rashi as a raya and as a reason that we are masking that Rashi didn't know, while the Eglah Tal, the Rav quotes, says that Rashi also agreed that it has a shell. And he actually gives two reasons for it, and we won't go into it. Okay. Two more points, and that's it. The Rabbeinu Tam, Rav says, the Rabbeinu Tam, the ones that bring hold the miyukes is the Chilazin. Bring a raya for Rabbeinu Tam that holds dam mifkat pocket. The Chilazin is dam mifkat pocket. The Rabbeinu Tam was mechadish of dam mifkat pocket. So that's a raya because the dam Chilazin is also we have the miyukes in mifkat pocket. The only problem is that there are many Rishonim that say different teretz. There's a whole shayla in the Gemara. I'm going to make it kitzer. I'm not going to get into it. And the place asks a question, and he says dam mifkat pocket, and other Rishonim say a different answer. Okay, so you have a raya from Rabbeinu Tam. But you have a whole bunch of Rishonim, 7, 8, 9 Rishonim that disagree with Rabbeinu Tam. And obviously, they held that was not Mifka pocket. So they obviously held that the Murex is not Techeiles, not Techeiles. Well, what's the answer? If they would have known that Techeiles is the Murex, then they would have agreed, they would have not said what they said. And the Rav says he's not going to even say all the names of the Rishonim that disagree with Rabbeinu Tam because it's not coveted to say their names in a place where all the ones that are arguing and saying that they made a tois. And the Rishonim Kamalachim, Chas Hashem to say their names. The only problem is that the Rishonim that disagreed with Rabbeinu Tam is not because they disagreed that the Dam Chilazin is Mifka pocket. That's not the reason. And it's evident, as someone pointed out, from other Rishonim that say Rabbeinu Tam's teretz. Look in the Ritva, look in the other Rishonim. They're on. They say Rabbeinu Tam's teretz and another teretz. And they're not chayzer for Rabbeinu Tam's teretz. Meaning to say that they held both terutzim are valid. So why did they say another teretz? That's clear. Bnei Yeshua says why they didn't say another teretz. Bnei Yeshua, when he discusses Rabbeinu Tam, he says, the dam Chilazin mifkat pocket. Tosis had the matchik the dam mifkat pocket. She hiktzas kedivin revius. He says, how in the world did Rabbeinu Tam know? He's not arguing with it. It's possible, but it's nevius. How from a question do you make a mitzias? How are you going to answer Bayis Hilchos Shabbos from a mitzias that you don't know? That's what the Pnei Yeshua says. Divrei nevius. And the morale on the says, "Beteretz ta'is b'shem Rabbeinu Tam tzarichin the dam tzviya mifkat pocket the dobazel mitzini b'shem makom." The same exact thing which Rabbeinu Tam, which Pnei Yeshua says. We don't find this mitzias. No one is disagreeing that it's possible such a mitzias, but just they felt much more comfortable to say a teretz which would be good, even if the mitzias would not be like that. And that is the way the Gedolei Achronim understood it. And this is what they themselves wrote. So there is no raya from all the Rishonim that disagree. There is no raya. And of course, if Dam Mifkat Pocket, Faket, we have a few Rishonim that say it. And that would be another smach, even though it's not so needed. But it's definitely not a raya against from all the Rishonim disagree. And the last raya, the Rav ends off with two Rishonim from the Ravid and the Ramak, he calls the Ramak a Rishon, that say that the Chilazin is some type of creature which is in between a tree, a tzemach, and a fish. He says the snail is not in between. Obviously, what snail is a snail. It's in between. It's some type of creature in between something that grows and a fish. That's what the Rav says. So we have another two Makaris. The Rav says that are not like the New York trunk list, but if they were known, of course they would have not said, and that's what the Rav says. Number one, there are many Rishonim, the Ravid, the Rabag, and others, Rabbi Pana, the Yavitz, and others that say that that Chilazin is this mitzias between a fish and a tzemach. What is this odd creature that's in between growing, something that grows, and a fish? Very odd. So for this, I would say over a Tashbatz. Tashbatz in Magen Avos, page 460 says, he speaks about Achesh in his bar, after it was in his bar, the whole world, the whole world is one thing, from beginning to end, is all mishtal shlik tzasik tzas. He says, you go from the Shorish of the Bria until the smallest thing on this Bria, they're all connected one to another. Ayin Sham, his derech, how he connects them all. He says, V'tchilas, then he goes on and on, V'tchilas madrega ha-balchai, the first madrega of Balchai is mechuber in the end of the tzmachim. The last tzemach and the first Balchai connect in between. There's some connection between them. And he explains them. Ki yesh Balchaim kiyomim, the Balchaim that the Kayim, they don't move around so like a tzemach, v'hem achal zoynos. And he goes on explaining. He goes on explaining this Balchai, which is in between a Balchai and a tzemach. I was going to say his words. V'hi kamei shabel, it's like a snail. Shetemas yahalach, shehi toish of haveres, it's in a tube. V'yigal al tzlam shal chayv hayom, it grows on the side of the ocean. But lasahi, which is the worm that would come out of the shell. Chatzi gufa b'teicha sheferes, half his guf b'tzlam ahem, b'dispashet would go a little bit to the right, to the yamin, smile. Worm comes out of the shell, right and left, Tivakish Choymin Mazon. And he says when it feels something, when it's going to feel something wet, the dakis, the spash the lame, it's going to go on it. And he goes on speaking about this thing. Ve'elo Shema, it doesn't have hearing, it can't see, it can't smell, and can't taste. The only thing is, it can only feel. Korav l'teva hatzamach. And he goes on, it's close to the tzeva from the tzemach. And v'zami he tzemach mitzad shitzmach grows like he says it grows like a plant and things like that. He goes on explaining what the connection between a snail and a tzemach is, and a snail and a fish is. And he's clearly explaining barichis, if anyone wants to understand his philosophy, understanding on the subject, ayin sham. But he clearly says that this Ravid and this Rami Pana and this Ralbag and this Yavitz and this all these Makaris, which say that the chilazon is in between a fish and something that grows is a snail. All these Makaris would be a raya, another raya that the chilazon is a snail, added to everything we said until now. And with that, I finish. I hope I was clear. I wasn't. I was because of the tightness. I wasn't. And I'm nervous. This is not my job. I don't do this. But hope that I added some clarification to the subject. And we should hear Nechamis, Tziyim, and Koltov.